Hello, Internet. I am Pastor Recoil, and welcome to my parish. Today is the 22nd Sunday after Pentecost, and we're going to talk about it. Welcome to Pastor Recoil's Parish, where I talk about some things in the Bible that you may not have heard about in church, either because it's not quite appropriate for all audiences, or it just isn't something that's easy to talk about in a sermon. Today's readings for the 22nd Sunday after Pentecost are Job 19, 23 through 27, Psalm 17, 1 through 9, 2 Thessalonians 2, 1 through 5 and 13 through 17, and Luke 20, 27 to 38. Today we're going to talk about one of Jesus' weirder teachings about a woman who had 7 husbands. In Luke 20, we get this very strange to us story of Jesus interacting with some folk, the Sadducees, who don't believe in a resurrection of the dead. And they come to Jesus with a question. Moses said in the law that if a man dies and he and his wife don't have any kids, his brother should marry her, so that the deceased man will have descendants. Well, what if there are 7 brothers and they each marry this one woman in turn, and they all die childless? At the resurrection, who is she going to be married to? Now, this is an example of what we'd now call a bad faith question. Remember, Luke tells us that these folk don't believe in the resurrection of the dead. They're asking to try to get Jesus in trouble, no matter how Jesus answers. When it comes to theology, they've already figured out that Jesus agrees more than the Pharisee group than with the Sadducee group. Now, Pharisees and Sadducees are kind of like different denominations within the Judean community at the time, but even then, denomination isn't really the right term, it's kind of the closest equivalent for us 21st century Christians. This conversation is happening during the last week before Jesus' crucifixion, when Jesus seems to do everything he can to make as many people mad at him as possible, so that he can be crucified at the right time. So far during this week in Luke's Gospel, Jesus has ridden into Jerusalem like a messianic king, prophesied Jerusalem's destruction in a rather obvious location, driven merchants out of the temple courts, and answered several trap questions in ways that are rather inflammatory. This interaction with the Sadducees is the last of these trap questions before Jesus goes into a whole bunch of teaching. The very next line after our gospel reading for today is Luke editorializing that no one dared ask Jesus any more questions after this. But what is Jesus' answer to the Sadducees' question? Who is this woman married to? Well, Jesus doesn't answer that question exactly. Instead, he says, at the resurrection, no one is married or given in marriage at all. Now, for a lot of Christians over the centuries, myself included, we've read that as kind of meaning that there isn't marriages in the kingdom of God. Over the centuries, it's been read as a call to celibacy or a call to asceticism. But what if it isn't? What if the point Jesus is actually making is that in the resurrection, no one is forced into a marriage that they don't want to be in? See, in the Sadducees' example, the woman had no agency. Whether she wanted to or not, she had to marry her dead husband's brother, and their brother all the way down the line. In her culture, she didn't have the ability to say, nope, I'm out. But Jesus is saying that in the resurrection, in the kingdom of God that is coming, she doesn't get given to anyone else. She can choose for herself what happens to her. So in other words, the answer might be, in the resurrection, this woman will be married to whoever this woman wants to be married to. Now, Jesus goes on to talk about the resurrection itself, giving evidence from the Sadducees' own scriptures that the resurrection is happening. But that's not really the important bit, I think, for us. The important bit is that in the kingdom of God, there is freedom from all forms of oppression, and humans will have their own agency and choice in what they do. It's rather unfortunate that the church has taken so long to start to realize this, but it is something worth our fighting toward. Fighting for a time when all humans are truly viewed as equals, with the same privileges, opportunities, and choices, regardless of who they are. So if you want to see more content like this, check out the links to my right, or click the logo below my face to subscribe so you'll know when my next video comes out. Thank you for watching, and take the time this week to love your neighbor as yourself, especially if you don't like them all that much.